Hello, hello, hello. Strategic Sage here with a new series. This is Dawn of Man and the entry point into my Historic Perspective series, which, if you don't know what that is, an intro video that's in the description below. Dawn of Man is an ancient time city builder by Madruga Works, same people that did Planet Base. This game was released a little over a year ago, and as soon as I saw it, I knew it had to be the one to start off HP with, because I think they do a generally excellent approach to handling early human development. I've also got my own custom mod that I made for this, fairly basic one, make things a bit more realistic and slow down the pacing some. But before we get into the game proper, let's take a look at the setting. Dawn of Man does not give you a specific geographic location. A decent guess might be the Fertile Crescent. A lot of early human settlements sprang up there, and even the game files sort of hint this way, with the environments all labeled Eurasia in one form or another. The rather obvious naming of the Fertile Crescent describes the crescent shape, and also the fact that with all the river networks, the Nile, Tigris, Euphrates, etc., it's a very easy place to grow and cultivate. So if that's where we are, then when are we? There's a lot going on here, but main thing to focus on is just the black line, which is the best estimates of modern science on temperature variations throughout the current geological epoch known as the Holocene. And it's pretty consistent until you get back to near the beginning of it, when it was much colder due to the last period of significant glacial activity, which ended at the end of the Pleistocene epoch. And quite appropriately, it is at that point, 12,000 years ago, that Dawn of Man begins. This is perhaps more commonly known as the Stone Age, because stone is the material that people used for tools most often. And Dawn of Man is divided into several areas, beginning with the Paleolithic, aka Old Stone Age. There's also Mesolithic, Middle, and Neolithic, New Stone Age. But those are a little bit misleading, because you can't just clearly define when one ends and the next one begins. There's a lot of overlap depending on where in the world you are. And in fact, if you take the Paleolithic era, it would actually be mostly complete by the time this timeline begins, by the time we get to 12,000 years ago. In some parts of the world, it would be almost totally complete. In other parts of the world, we'd only be partway through that. But in Dawn of Man, you start at the beginning of the Paleolithic era. And a lot of the advances we're going to see early on in the game had actually already occurred in most, if not all, of the world. An easy example of that kind of overlapping in terms of when things are discovered and utilized in different places can be seen in the modern era with the internet. It did not take long for all developed countries in the world to adopt that and begin using that technology, but at the same time, right now, 25 years later, we're still at a point where only a little over half the world has internet access. There's still second and third world countries, they used to be called, developing countries, at various stages of progression. And all of those things in the ancient era are much, much more prominent with the overlapping of the time frame. And a lot of what we think we know is really just guesswork here. Educated guesswork, it's pretty good guesswork, but there's a great deal of debate among scholars in terms of details of how people lived at this time. How much did they interact via trading? What was their social structure like? How aware were they of the dangers of inbreeding, and how much did they actually do that? Fighting between certain groups. But having said that, we are placing ourselves at the beginning of the Holocene. Temperatures are warming, glacial activity is receding, and that, of course, allows for wildlife to flourish. It allows for plants to flourish. And humanity has adapted to a much harsher lifestyle and survived. As the conditions improve around them, we think that occasioned more and more settlements being built, although we know of some as far back as a few thousand years before this. We think the typical size of a group was around 24 people. Getting more than 30 was problematic due to social conflict, and so they would split into multiple groups if that happened. And a lot of migration would occur, but how much of that depends on how good the conditions were in an area. How much could the land support? Some people were able to have an almost sedentary lifestyle, while others were constantly moving around, and in the middle they'd maybe do migration throughout the year to get things that were in season in various areas. And it's limited how far you can travel, obviously, because we're talking about traveling on foot. Life expectancy was quite short by our standards, but it actually was decent for most of human history. We think it was in the low 30s, and it wouldn't get significantly higher than that until about 100 years ago. Infant mortality was a huge problem. Optimistic estimates are that you had a 2 in 5 chance of surviving until you were 15. And if you made it that far, you're pretty good. You'd probably live into your 50s. But on the more pessimistic side, there are some researchers who think roughly half of children were killed as infants by their parents due to things like not being able to spare the resources for them, so on. Any sort of illness, any infection, accidents would happen. A rough patch in terms of weather would put you short on food. Hostile predators in the animal kingdom. There are any number of things that could really decimate the community. But on the other hand, it is also actually thought that they lived a fairly leisurely lifestyle for the most part. Working as little as 15 hours a week, food is a primary concern, so if you're in a particularly good area, which eventually most of the groups would gravitate to, the population's kept reasonably low, so you're not overusing the land. Modern researchers think that they actually didn't work as hard as we do today in terms of the time. For the purposes of establishing a baseline, this is the default starting scenario in Dawn of Man. We've got a few basic buildings, we've got a good area cleared around us, so we have more area to expand if we want, and there's 7 of us in the community. Various ages, everybody's got decent clothes, everybody's got basic equipment. And then looking at the broader terrain sort of picture, we've got all kinds of mountains, and it's pretty rugged for most of it. There's some clear areas, but it kind of looks like somebody just sort of threw up on the terrain. That's always the impression it's given me. I think it's more rugged than mostly would have been the case in this sort of time frame, because people would have gravitated to places that are flatter. Of course, farming is not a thing yet, but we're going to greatly value wildlife, which is going to flourish more in areas where there's a lot of plants, so you have increased density of predators and prey. And I think this was probably done by the developers just to give the land more variability. But it just doesn't seem to me to be the most sensible approach. Now we can contrast all of that with this, our starting scenario. I've named it Inception, seemed appropriate. And you can see the terrain isn't nearly as rugged. Now that isn't to say it's totally flat. We've got some hills, got this rocky area over here, got a little bit there, more of this over here, but also a lot more what you might call lowlands. Like the overall plain just seems a lot flatter because it does not appear in the game that there's any way to have like an elevated plateau or a lower valley that's flat area. You just have the one level and then you've got heights ascending from that. The mountains far off in the distance are a skybox thing. You can't go anywhere near that far away. They're just basically to give you an extended perimeter. And then down here, we have our wonderful citizens of our community, as it were. Take a look at them real quick. And we have a bit of a problem over here. We'll get to that in a second. But we've got 5 instead of the starting 7. You could get away with a little bit less than that, maybe 3 to 4, but I wasn't trying to push it into an extreme scenario. 1 adult male, 2 adult women, and then we've got the 2 children who will be the real future. You can see very minimal equipment, more rags than clothes. And the sort of backstory idea here is that I imagine them having traveled after some disaster. Part of their community got wiped out by something. And so being desperate, they traveled further than they might otherwise have to an area that's not yet got a thriving community. And this is not meant to represent any specific place. This is more of a thematic thing because, again, the advances that we're going to see are happening in various places. This is simply Inception's story. So what do we need to do? Well, let's take a look at the resources, and that's best done here. Primal Vision or the tab key. And Primal Vision just displays a whole bunch of different colors. It sort of grays out all of the standard terrain, and then any special resources or wildlife are highlighted. Lets you see the big picture a little bit better. So the animals start off at the worst end with red. Red is a dangerous animal. This is a cave lion. It's a good thing that they give us a grace period before they start attacking, which they'll tend to do every once in a while, because otherwise they'd probably be munching on us already. Next up is orange. I think we got a couple over here. Yep, there's an old male. So all the animals and humans work on 3 age scales, young, adult, and old. The older ones and younger ones obviously being weaker, not being in the prime of life. So that's why that one is orange. And then we've got yellow, 4 adult wild horse, and the younger ones are green. And that's sort of the 4 colors of those. Everything else around here is resources. Here we've got another thing to beware, a woolly rhino. Another horse. The horses are too fast for us to try to hunt at this point. Got a megaloceros over here, and those are basically a larger predecessor to the modern reindeer. Then if we look around, we've got a donkey over here. We've got some more donkeys over here. But here's something interesting right in front of us. An old boar. And boars are actually not as dangerous in the game as they should be, but also this being an older one, anything with health less than 100 is a reasonable target for us. Above that, you can forget about it. Boars aren't particularly fast, so we've got a good chance at knocking that out. Our first priority really right now is get away from this thing. We move over here. That should get us up on a hill, and then we're going to take our hunter also and go after the boar. So there's a couple ways of controlling people. One is to give them specific orders, and we'll get to the other one in just a second here because we need to gather some resources to start building up something. And we got to be careful as to where. The key thing here is the river. Everybody needs to drink at the river. The animals do, we do. Predators are going to be drawn here in additional numbers as well as prey. And you can see that clearly we're outnumbered. Humanity does not have control of this area. We're going to have to be smarter than the more dangerous wildlife if we're going to survive. So we want to build somewhere that's a ways back. Now let's do a work area. We're going to grab some sticks from this over here. We'll just shrink that down a little bit. And this is the automated way of giving people instructions. You just add them tasks and give them a little bit of instruction. So we're going to have 3 people working on that. We'll let them go up to about 30 sticks. And that means that 3 people will be working on this area as long as there are these little stick icons that need to be collected. And we don't already have 30 of them. So where are we going to put those? Now we need to build. We'll do a wood pile. And we want to be a decent way away from the water, but close enough that we can travel to it. And I'm just going to stick it over here in this tree area. I think right about there is a decent spot for it. Let's do that. And they actually don't need anything to build the piles. They'll just throw some random stuff around to make a square and delineate the area. So that's an initial start. And while we're going over here hunting, let's take a closer look at some of our people here. So each adult has 3 or 6 slots. 2 for their equipment. Got the wooden spear for hunting and fighting. Biface, which is basically a rock in a wedge shape for harvesting, butchering, etc. And there it goes chasing after the boar. And then also 1 clothing slot and 3 carry slots. Let's take a look at this hunt here real quick. It's trying to run. It's crossing the river. Come on, catch it. Nice throw. We got it. They, of course, have unlimited spears, not just the one. We gain 1 knowledge from that. And he's going over to butcher it now, so hang on a second. And the knowledge we'll get to in just a bit. No, I don't want you to do that. Gotta love the misclick. Okay, so let's get a helper over there. Because notice that they have 3... Yeah, you go ahead and come over here. They have 3 carry slots, each adult does. But if we take a look at our boar, we've got 3 meat to eat, obviously. Raw skin will be used for building. Bones, we don't have any way to use that yet. But that's 5, not 3. So we're going to get another person over there to help carry. And then, let's see over here. We're doing a pretty good job of gathering the sticks. And they haven't built the wood pile yet. Okay. What I want to do here is we need to deal with that raw skin. We're going to build production a skin dryer. And I want to build this on a hill because of the sun needing to shine down on it and dry things out. Now, that isn't necessary. You can build it in the shade and it wouldn't make any difference in terms of the game. But from a logical standpoint, from the way these things would actually have worked, obviously it being out in the middle of the sun, open exposed, that's all going to work better. So let's see how we're doing over here. Okay, she's coming over here, so this was just in time. Then I'm just going to have her pick this up. We've got a couple things down here that weren't gotten. Again, because of space. There's... Hold on a second. I need to find... There's got to be one more. There we go. There's the bone. There you go. Pick up that bone. And now she's going to go back. Okay. So all of that's done. There you are, bringing your meat back. That's a beautiful thing. And then, of course, this is where the skin dryer is going to be. Now what? And we can see that we're bringing more stuff over here towards this. Yes, no clothing, no fishing tools. We'll get to all that. But we're also going to need some sort of place to stay. That's the first issue that we're going to run into. So we're going to want to put up a tent. This is our baseline place where people can live. And I want to try to use this area over here as much as possible. And you can rotate these as well when you place them down. So let's see, just sort of facing the middle. Now each of these requires 2 dry skins and 4 sticks. The sticks we're going to have, and we got 1 skin that we're going to dry on this thing when it gets built. So we don't really quite have enough yet. Take a look at the predator situation around right now. We've got mostly horses, I think, over here. These are donkeys. Horses over there. Still this pack over there doesn't appear to have moved much. I think our cave lion here has moved off some, so we're feeling a little bit more safe in that direction. Rhino's moving around a bit. Nothing major new over there. And we've got our Megaloceros has crossed the river, but it's still a ways away, and that's not hostile anyway. Looking over the edge of this, let's see what else we have in this direction. A couple new things over here. Mouflon is a rugged type of sheep, and that would be a really nice find. An old one of those. They're slower, or rather faster than a boar, but not as hardy. Of course, the Mouflon not as docile as the modern bred version of a sheep. Boar over there, we can see, like the adults, 120 health. That would be a little bit too much to take on with one hunter, I think. Donkey here. And over here we have another Mouflon. This one's even a little bit closer. I think this is a really good target to get another skin so we can get that tent up. Let's see what some of our people are up to. And our hunter is needing to drop this stuff off. And just did. Excellent. We can hear the donkeys braying. Let's get over here. And get that Mouflon. Okay. So hopefully that will all work out for us. Now in the meantime, we're going to be working on building up this. And it's worth noting, by the way, just to tether ourselves to reality, there's no fog of war in the game. To actually see all this stuff from where our people are, they would have to climb up on rocks or on trees, and they'd possibly miss predators hiding somewhere. And if they did, you know, well, I hope you enjoyed your life. The thing about this is, you know, it's a game, so there is some liberty taken with that, but there's no fog of war like some games have with this kind of thing, although usually not city builders. So we have perfect knowledge of everything that's going on, and we can make our decisions based on that. Of course, it would be much more hazardous realistically. Now, if we take a look at some of our needs here for our people, we've got the health. Need something to eat. They need something to drink. They need to not be too cold. Heat is not so much a problem. Stamina goes down if they've done a bunch of strenuous work. They'll need to recover that. Rest is the main reason we had to go with the residents. They need somewhere to sleep, and they won't just sleep outside on the ground, which I think it'd be nice if they did that and took a morale hit. I think that'd be more fitting. And the skins dryer is finished. Excellent. Then the final one is morale. People do need some diversions. That's a psychological thing, and there are a number of issues that play into that that we'll get to. So we've seen the 6 slots that the adults have. Do we have any? Yeah, okay. Let's take a look at some of the children here. And they just have the 1 carry slot and clothing. Same needs. But they don't have any tools, therefore can't do any advanced work. But child labor is still very much a thing. See, we're still working on picking up the sticks in this area. So they are definitely being productive. They're just not as productive as the adults. And then if we take a look at the elderly that we don't have yet, but they would have the same thing as an adult. They're just missing one carry slot, and they're a little bit weaker physically. So they're more useful than a child, but not as useful as an adult. Let's see how our hunting project is going. And it looks like we're about to have some action here. Let's get somebody else over there to help pick up, assuming that we make the kill here. All right, you're going to go to the tent. You know what? Why don't you go and let you drop off that load, and then we will send you back the other way. You just got a little bit of distance that you've got to walk here yet. And we did get the mouflon. Excellent. So we're none too early in getting any of this done. There we go. And let's get moving over here. And then off, it's somewhere in this general area. And we'll figure that out in a bit. So our toolbar is up at the top, but you can customize some of them later. We've got meat, sticks, this is our inventory, bone, raw skin, etc. All of that. And we are butchering this thing, right? Let me make sure that we're actually doing that. Yep, you are actually doing it. Good job. Keep up the good work. And then on this side, there's some other interesting things. Population, a couple key things here. No space for anybody else. Migrants will not come to the settlement. No burst will take place until we have enough capacity. And the one tent isn't going to satisfy that, but it's another reason to get that moving. And migration is the main way you tend to get people in the game, but not in this case. Because in this particular case, I have turned that off to help with the pacing issue, which I'll get to in a minute. We've got 10 sticks. That gives us a little bit more knowledge. And speaking of knowledge, current count is 4. We'll get to back that in a second. Here's our workload. So we actually have enough people to complete all the tasks that we have at the moment. Where is our assistant here? There you are. And over here is where our stuff is. Okay. So we're going to want to make sure that you actually continue on your way over there. Then we've got our temperature, and it is currently springtime. So what we're going to use the knowledge for is in here. And we've got our tech tree. We can see the different ages. You have to get a gatekeeper tech to advance to the next age. And this is another pacing issue that I've done, is I've increased the cost in here by 50%. So everything in the Paleolithic requires 8 knowledge to unlock, but in actuality it would typically require 5. And the reason I've done that is not just to slow the game down artificially. That's not the point. But it's more a situation, the default pacing, you'd go through multiple ages with the same group of people that you originally started with, which logically speaking makes no sense. People would live for hundreds and thousands of years at the same level before advancing. This game is going to encompass 9,000 plus years of human history, probably 2/3, 3/4 of the entire project. So it doesn't make any sense to just sort of accelerate it to that extent. Of course, we're not going to slow it down nearly as much as would be quote-unquote realistic. The game would take forever. But sort of trying to find a happy medium there. And then if we want to take a look at where our knowledge comes from, this part I think is quite cool and excellently done. So we can go down here to manage more, and you can just hit 8 to bring this up. But we're looking for knowledge progress. And we can get more by increasing our population. We can get more by eliminating raiders or by getting domestic animals. And there's the animals that you hunt, the structures, and the resources. And it's not linear. There's a diminishing returns thing that goes on. For example, we got 1 skins dryer. We won't get more points until we get 3. We got 1 mouflon. We won't get more until we get 5 of them. And I think that models very well sort of the way that you tend to learn things. You do something for the first time, you learn a bunch of it once because you're starting from 0, so everything's new. As you do it more and more, you learn a little bit less about it on top of what you already knew each time, and then you get to a while where it just becomes routine, and you don't tend to learn that much about it except for maybe occasionally as you've done it a huge amount, then some things will click into place and you'll get a little bit better up to a point. And so all of this really encourages diversification in the game, getting different types of resources, a diverse diet, experimenting with all the different buildings, etc. Now, it's not perfect. You can game it by just building a bunch of stuff that you don't need, which I won't be doing for this, but it's out there as a possibility. You don't get a health bonus for having a diverse diet. But the general thrust of it is, in my opinion, really, really excellent. So the aspiring settlement of Inception is on its way. We're going to need to finish that residence, bring the skins back to be dried, do a whole bunch of other things as we're just getting this adventure started. But I hope you've enjoyed this first episode, and there's going to be a lot more to come. See you soon as our adventure continues.